Time for another round of commentary on tournament games. So, I'm going to be reviewing two games between Rio and Piercing. So, for context, Piercing is about at my level. We tend to trade games quite a lot. Rio isn't S tier player. He wins the vast majority of his games through his very careful and defensive gameplay. But let's examine what transpired. So the first map that they played was on Decimation Valley. I quite like this map. It just has a very good flow to it. So both players start out very strong. The only commentary that I really have about the opener here is that Rio knows what kind of player Piercing is. Piercing is very often an aggressive player who tends to strike early in the game, usually within the first 3 minutes. But that actually doesn't happen in this game. So Rio builds 6 offensives right away in anticipation of being attacked early. And this also puts him in a very good position to contest whatever challenge to the mid scrap there may be. Now, I have a feeling that Rio builds these structures in anticipation that he might get attacked from the left angle, but that doesn't happen in this game, so these buildings just end up being sitting idle. But sometimes it works out that way. In regards to what Piercing is doing, he actually doesn't have a whole lot to work with in terms of like denial. Like he builds a couple of turrets. He's just now building his tanks, whereas Rio has way more to work with. Like, look at that. It's beautiful. So in general, Piercing tries to emphasize the outside area of the map in terms of scrap collection. The biggest mistake that Piercing makes in this game is that he does not deny this scrap. Now, this is 96 units of scrap. Okay, this is enough to build like 2 full sets of offensives. You cannot let your opponent get that for free on this map. It's a very good way to lose the game. That's the other thing about this scrap here. It takes like 30 seconds for 2 scavs to clean all of this up. With 1 silo. But the downside with this spot is that if this silo doesn't exist, it's a real pain to collect from this area. Like there is no place where you can put a silo that is anywhere near this scrap. So what Piercing needed to do was like make sure that Rio can't build a silo in the middle of the map. Any way possible to get rid of that silo, like whether it's like shooting a comet from the hilltop over here or using a bomber and just blowing it up, or putting like a howitzer like anywhere in this area and just shelling it. Like you cannot let your opponent have this, but he does, and Rio's pretty much set for the rest of the game. But regardless, both players are in a very good position. We can see that, like right about at this point, both players have lots of scrap to work with, lots of pilots, and Rio is basically just gearing up to challenge the remainder of the scrap on the map. He basically controls this whole corner, which is the last of the scrap on the map. And this is where things start to go south for Piercing, because what he decides to do is move his factory to the to these geysers. Now, for a lot of players, this would actually be a good idea, but the problem with doing this against Rio is that 9 times out of 10, he's going to have at the bare minimum 2 howitzers to deny geysers, so that you can't deploy anywhere without eventually having your production unit destroyed. And that's pretty much exactly what happens here. So we see Piercing taking his factory, and there's another commentary that I have here about the way Rio tends to fight. So you can almost draw a line that Rio will be very unlikely to cross, because he wants you he wants to pull you back to if you destroy his stuff, it's going to be much closer to his recycler, so that he can recover that very easily. And the mistake that Piercing makes here is that he pushes forward. And now these are Piercing is playing as Black Dog, so these are not these are basically the bomber equivalent in the strap balance patch. These are equipped with dual rockets. So unfortunately, Piercing does have to kind of push forward in order to damage these tanks, because this is on a hill. Piercing really needed to keep his units back and make sure that the majority of the scrap falls on the top of this hill, so that it'd be harder for Rio to challenge that. But Rio successfully manages to bait Piercing into having his tanks destroyed on his side of the field. Okay, and this is all free resources that he gets, and because he has a hangar back here, whatever damage that he does to these tanks is going to be completely nullified, because he can just get them repaired right away. He also makes really good use of APCs here. I think this is a bug with the recorder. These soldiers die so fast that they don't register a destroy event, and they just get stuck here. So I'm not quite sure what to do about that, but whatever. Now, you'll see that the factory is being damaged, but there doesn't seem to be any units around it. So what's up with that? The playback recorder doesn't really communicate really well currently. Again, he has these two howitzers attacking that factory, and there is nothing that Piercing can do about this right now, because he doesn't have any howitzers. He doesn't have anything that can challenge them. So moving this factory up here was just a huge mistake on Piercing's part. So that factory is going to be destroyed, and now Piercing has no quick way to get offensives back into this position. He really needed to just use this geyser and try to have a silo out here just outside of the range of the howitzers. And he also needed more scavengers too. Right now, Piercing only has 5 scavengers to work with. I think 6 in this case, but he really needed 10. Generally, you want more scavengers if their drop-off point is pretty far from where the scrap is. So he does make some good moves with these turrets here to try to lock down this position. I think what Piercing could have done is, if he really wanted to fight in this position, these turrets needed to be up quite a bit, so that Rio would be forced to use the howitzers on them, and it would have bought him a lot more time to try to collect this scrap and recover, if he really wanted to put his factory on this geyser right here. That's generally it. I mean, Rio's just really good about fighting defensively and making sure that scrap drops on his side of the field. And again, he's in really good shape resource-wise pretty much the entire game. Let's actually look at the stats here. And we can see that both players did quite well with resource management. I don't feel that either player made a whole lot of mistakes in terms of resource management, with the exception of Piercing not building enough scavengers. So I think both players did exceptionally well here. It's just that Rio just knew how to break that position, and Piercing paid for it. let's move on to the next map, which is Corner Pocket. Now, I flattened out this map quite a bit so that we can see a little bit easier. These walls are actually much higher than what is displayed here, so just keep that in mind. Piercing actually wins this map, and this is one of Piercing's best maps. And a lot of players tend to be annoyed with this particular map because it can feel like a coin toss, because your options for dealing with your opponent after you've settled on these geysers on the corner here are extremely limited. Like, if you don't win the direct fight against your opponent on either side of the map, it's basically game over. So I can kind of sympathize with a lot of players that where like it can be frustrating because it feels like a coin toss, but there are ways to combat it. It just takes time to pick up on those nuances. So let's see what Piercing does to set up Rio's defeat on this map. Again, he is very, very strong on this map. Like, I have a very low win rate against Piercing on this map, despite the fact that, you know, I've developed a lot of strategies to counter what he does. So what Piercing does right away is that he goes all the way over here, and he orders he orders his constructor to build a silo right there. So his constructor just heads on to the other side of the map and builds that silo. And then after all of the scrap in here is collected, what he does is he orders all of the scavengers, every single one of them, to go to that constructor. So now he has 4 scavengers. They're going to be collecting, let's see, roughly 120 units worth of scrap for free. This goes completely uncontested for the entire game. What Rio could have done to contest this was to literally, like, what he should have done is sent one of these scouts on hunt to make sure it gets to this side of the map, so that it can clear out these scavengers and deny him that scrap. That is what lost him the game. He did not make sure that Piercing did not get this scrap. And we see that both players successfully make it to this side of the map. You can actually kind of see the speed difference of the recyclers here, sort of. But the Black Dog units tend to be a little bit faster than the NSDF ones. Both players pretty much have equivalent offensive forces right now. Fighting ensues like it normally would, but there's one huge problem with this. As this fighting happens, Piercing's getting more and more scrap, and Rio is not. Rio is basically bankrupt. Like, because he lost that silo here, he has no resources to work with now. Like, there is no way to come back from leaving all this scrap on the field. And the only reason that Rio left that scrap on the field is because, like, he had to fight for this. He had no choice. So there's nothing that he could have done otherwise. So after Piercing locks down this side of the map, that's essentially it. Again, he's really good about making sure that the odds are stacked up against you on this map. Generally, when you open on this map, you want to make absolutely sure that your opponent is not challenging one of the sides of the map for free. You cannot let them get away with this. So anything that you can do, build your factory early for the 1,000-meter range while it lasts. Send a scout down here so that you can get rid of any kind of, like, sneaky silo builds. It is worth the 6 scrap to guarantee that your opponent does not do this. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, Piercing is a very, very tough opponent on this map. Let's look at the stats again. So these stats are kind of predictable. both players are going to be pretty much equal until the other side comes into play, and then we see that the moment the moment the scrap disappears, that Rio's in red. His scrap intake flatlines, whereas Piercing's scrap intake just steadily increases. Like, yeah, this is how much of a difference contesting the other side of the map makes, and it really shows in the charts. Um, the only thing that I think that Piercing could have done better is just we see that he has a lot of resources at his disposal, and we don't see a whole lot of downward trends, which means that he wasn't really spending his scrap enough. We see this in the pilots too. Like, he has plenty of pilots, so there's no reason for him to not be building crap at this point. Anyways, that's it. I hope to do more of these, and yeah, have a good one.